Kia ora, and welcome to Thursday's Economy Watch, where we follow the economic events and trends that affect Aotearoa. I'm David Chaston, and this is the international edition from interest.co.nz. And today we lead with news that pressure is off the US Fed from inflation threats, temporarily at least. First today, and as markets had expected, US CPI inflation came in at 3.4% in July, dipping from 3.5% in June. Food prices are up 3% from a year ago. Petrol prices are up more than 24%. From June, though, petrol prices fell 2.9%, which was a bit more than expected. In August, petrol prices have dipped slightly in the first week, but have started rising again. Rents are up 3.2% in that CPI result, and electricity prices are up 4.2%. US core inflation, that's without food and energy, was up 2.5%, and this is probably the Fed's get-out-of-jail card. US PCE July inflation data is due next on August the 27th. US mortgage applications recovered notably last week, up 3.6% from the prior week after 4 of the prior 6 weeks were decreases. The rise was driven by refinance activity, borrowers who could not wait any longer and taking advantage of a very minor dip in mortgage interest rates to 6.77%, which to us seems high. Last week, the US reported a huge surge in crude oil stocks, the largest weekly rise in more than 3 years. It wasn't expected. In fact, another retreat was expected. It is not clear why, because it wasn't driven by imports, according to this data. Strategic reserves will next be reported at month end. And the August USDA World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report has raised its estimates for beef imports to the US in 2026 and 2027 and lowered its expected milk prices marginally. The US Treasury reported a much larger budget deficit for July than expected, and the expected July deficit was outsized to start with. They ended up with almost $500 billion US deficit in the month alone. The public mismanagement is now epic. For their fiscal year to September, they will be reporting a deficit of at least $2 trillion US, easily a new record. Meanwhile, a well-supported US Treasury 10-year auction delivered a yield of 4.63% today, compared to 4.53% at the prior equivalent event a month ago. Canadian building consents jumped notably in June, up 18% from the same month a year ago, driven by non-residential construction. Residential construction rose too, just not as sharply as the commercial sector. In Japan, the Reuters Tankan Index for manufacturers rose in August to its highest reading since March. Leading the mood improvement was solid semiconductor demand. But the chemicals industry also rose along with the metal and machinery sectors. Non-manufacturer sentiment also rose, buoyed by strong domestic consumption. This survey likely points to a similar rise in the official Tankan survey, which will come later in August. Japanese machine tool orders continued their very strong growth in July, up 50% from a year ago, and while the value wasn't a record, it was very close. These orders have taken off since March 2026. Demand was huge from both domestic and export customers. China's vehicle sales slipped below 2.5 million in July and recorded a year-on-year dip of 0.3%, but it is their September to December period when domestic vehicle sales usually peak. The US Treasury 10-year yield is now just on 4.67%, dipping 2 basis points from this time yesterday. And the price of gold is rising at $4,417 an ounce, up $51 from yesterday. Silver's risen $1 to be just over $65.50 an ounce. And oil prices are down 50 US cents from yesterday at just under $83 a barrel, while the international Brent price is now just over $88.50 a barrel. Hormuz transits are still very low. The Kiwi dollar is down 25 basis points from yesterday at just under 58.6 US cents. Against the Aussie, we're down 40 basis points at 82.9 Australian cents. Against the euro, we've retreated 20 basis points at 50.8 euro cents. That all means our trade-weighted index starts today at just on 62.2, which is down 30 basis points from yesterday. And the Bitcoin price starts today at $63,420 and down 0.2% from yesterday. Volatility over the past 24 hours has been low, at just on plus or minus 0.9%. You can get more news affecting the economy in New Zealand from interest.co.nz. Kia ora. I'm David Chaston. We'll do this again tomorrow.